Well, we are at our next to last chapter that we're going to cover. This is the chapter on monopolistic competition and the definition of monopolistic competition and the characteristics. Most of the businesses we frequent on a daily basis are either monopolistic or oligopolies. Definition: monopolistic competitors have a relatively large number of firms, and while that title, monopolistic competition, may sound almost like an oxymoron, it is really both. The monopolistic comes from the fact that even though there are many of them, they are each a little bit different. For example, if you're looking for fried chicken, Popeyes makes it a little bit differently than Kentucky Fried Chicken, who makes it a little differently from Harp's grocery store. So they're all a little bit different. So to that extent, they're monopolistic, but there are many, many, many competitors. So many places where one could get fried chicken or any lunch of any kind for that matter. So there are very many of them. They do have some control over price, but they would much rather people buy their product because of some other characteristic. So there should be several bullet points under product differentiation, and one should be service. Many small businesses offer a lot of service, and people often will frequent them because of that. And I think one thing that has made service better in all industries is the fact that we have the internet now. There are places like Yelp and TripAdvisor where people rate businesses. So I believe that customer service has gotten much better over the years, and people like good service, and some businesses are known for good service, and they'll get a following for that reason. So that's very important under product differentiation. Also, as the rules of real estate are, there are three rules of real estate, I believe: location, location, and location. So location can be vitally important for a business. That's not to say if they aren't off the beaten path, they can't get business, but they better be good. If you have to get people to drive way out of their way to go there, then they better be really good. So location can be very important, and a lot of those locations um, have top dollar real estate. For example, there's a Walmart on 7th Street, West 7th in Joplin, and when it went out there, it was pretty much the only thing out there. But the Taco Bell came later because, after all, who doesn't want to be close to a Walmart? And that little small lot that Taco Bell is sitting on went for hundreds of thousands of dollars, whereas before Walmart it would have gone for a fraction of that. So location can be vital under product differentiation. Also, um, they're they may advertise a lot. They would like for you to recognize their product. Like Nike swoosh, all you have to see is the swoosh, you know it's Nike. The Starbucks mermaid, Starbucks used to have Starbucks coffee around that mermaid. Now they just have the mermaid because everybody knows what that is. Or the Chick-fil-A chicken. I mean, we recognize those labels. Monopolistic competitors will spend a lot to protect their logo, protect their trademark. Anytime you see that little TM after a product name, it's trademarked. You may see the R with a circle around it. That just means that it has been registered. So that's what those things mean, and they need to protect those so no one else copies that and everybody recognizes it, the golden arches or whatever it is. Um, so again, they have some control over price, but they would much rather use non-price competition, like advertising, convincing you that theirs is better, rather than just compete on price. But they do have to be aware they do have competition. So the industry concentration ratio, this is important. It is measured by the four firm concentration ratio. You really don't need to know anything about the Herfindahl index. I don't see that mentioned that often, but I do see the firm concentration ratio mentioned. In fact, the Justice Department looks at this when deciding to allow a merger often. So that is the percentage of sales by the four largest firms in the industry. Um, the four firm concentration ratio is the output of the four largest firms divided by the total output in the industry. So if that percentage is less than 40%, it would be considered a monopolistically competitive industry. If it's more than 40%, it would be considered an oligopoly, like delivery systems, package delivery. I mean, they're definitely an oligopoly. The biggest firms have most of the output, like the post office and UPS and FedEx, and now Amazon, which is moving into that in a big way. But it's definitely an oligopoly. Let's look at some examples of some that are less than 40%. Jewelry's getting close. The top four firms making jewelry have 32% of the market. So eventually they could become an oligopoly through acquisitions, perhaps. But also remember, this only looks at the market share in the United States. Some of these industries, like jewelry and women's dresses, have competition from overseas. Retail bakeries, a very small percentage with a four firm concentration ratio. Of course, that's a product that has a shelf life, and it would be more likely to be a monopolistic competitor. Looking at another one, wood pellets, which only the four firm concentration has 12% of total market. That's one you would think, well, this is such a basic product. I mean, anybody could make wood pallets, true, but although they're really cheap to make, they're probably pretty expensive to ship. So they're probably more localized, more local companies making those for sale in the local market. So, what about demand for a monopolistic competitor? Highly elastic, not perfectly elastic. Price matters. There may be a short run profit or loss, just like any other market structure, but they're still going to produce where marginal revenue greater than or equal to marginal cost. So let's look at, in the short run, a monopolistically competitor making a profit. If, again, they're going to produce where marginal revenue is greater than or equal to marginal cost and charge a price on the demand curve. So in this case, if that price is above the average total cost, they have a profit, an economic profit. And obviously, they would like to see that in the long run as well, and may be able to do that. So if the price is above average total cost, we know that average variable cost is also covered. There could be situations where there's a short run loss, where price is lower than the average total cost, like it is in this case. They're still producing where marginal revenue greater than or equal to marginal cost, charging a price on the demand curve. But if their costs rise or if their demand goes down, they may be operating at a loss for the short run. This is happening as I'm making this PowerPoint. We're in the coronavirus pandemic, and many small businesses are operating at a loss. But they have to cover those average variable costs to be able to stay in business. If they can't, they've got to either shut down in the short run or maybe get a loan to tide them over for a while. And that's one of the purposes of this big government stimulus program that's going on, allowing loans to businesses if they stay open and continue to pay their employees, or even if they have to close down, continue to pay their employees. So it is possible to have a short run loss. In the long run, the book says there may only be a normal profit, but this is not always the case. Um, that means that they would be charging a price right on the average total cost curve. But of course, we see that it's not perfectly efficient because that price is not the lowest average total cost. But there are many businesses out there that may be able to make long run economic profits. They get a niche, people like them, they have a great location, and they may be making economic profits forever. And remember, again, if they're making really a lot of economic profits, it may be the time to go ahead and expand and make that decision to add another business, like a bakery, adding another bakery in the neighborhood, or or something like that. One that comes to my mind that's one of my favorites is Rick's Bakery down in Fayetteville, Arkansas. They've got a great location right on College. They're very unusual in some of the things that they make that I've not seen emulated, and they're good, and people like them. And I hardly ever see them advertised, but people know about them, and they may be making profits forever because people like them. They're really good at what they do. If they're making economic profits, maybe they'd want to open up another, but maybe they don't want to work that hard. Maybe they're very happy with where they are, and they don't want to add another business. So, but that would be a long run decision if they did decide to do that. So we see that monopolistic competitors are not perfectly efficient producers because the price is greater than minimum average total cost. It would be equal to average total cost if it's productively efficient. Of course, the perfect competitor is the only one that is. Price is greater than marginal cost, so it is not perfectly allocatively efficient either. There is usually some excess capacity. I mean, businesses aren't usually at their capacity. Barbershops are rarely full completely. Restaurants, um, even the local Dollar General store, they're rarely at their capacity, what numbers of consumers that they can have at one time. So that makes them somewhat inefficient producers. Um, this again would show what the monopolistic competitor would look like if they were a perfectly efficient. That means they would be producing and selling at the minimum average total cost, which they're not for the most part. So they can make economic profits forever, or at least totally break even on economic profits. So, how does the firm manage price, product, and advertising? Um, the monopolistic competitor has to, but they would much rather you buy their product because you think it's good, not because it's cheaper. So they'll differentiate their product. They'll position themselves a certain way, maybe spend on advertising, which is much easier to do now, and much easier way to target it now with the internet. So they're able to do that. And the consumers benefits by a greater array of choices, better products, certainly because better customer service with the internet and that available. But one thing I have learned from this recent pandemic, this coronavirus pandemic, boy, there are a lot of different prices out there for the same thing. So as I'm ordering more online now, I'm finding that out, and I think I'll be a better consumer when this is all over. But there are a lot of types and styles and brands and quality out there. Um, and we need to still, though, be aware that just because something is a higher price doesn't necessarily mean it's a better quality. Um, and that's something that I think we all learn as we shop more and more online, and find different different prices. The last thing in the book, in this chapter, we've talked about this before, higher minimum wages and how they affect these small mom and pop type of restaurants and businesses, which are more labor intensive. Bigger chains can actually weather a minimum wage increase better than a smaller business because they're capital intensive. They have the money capital to go out and invest in labor saving machines and so on. So it doesn't affect them as much. Um, the mom and pop restaurants could possibly be put out of business, or at least mom and pop have to work harder, because they may not be able to hire as many workers. So sometimes the public doesn't think about that when voting for higher minimum wages. It tends to favor the bigger companies, not necessarily the small ones, and certainly the ones that are working for those businesses that may not be able to keep their job. So anyway, we've talked about that before. But again, the monopolistic competitor, that under 40% top four firms, is considered a monopolistic competitor.